Visit sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions.
Hi, I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. In today's tutorial video, we're going to show you how to make traditional box cushions with a zipper on the underside rather than in the boxing like we do in other videos. So the technique's a little bit different. It's also going to include snaps on the bottom side to hold the cushion in place on this power boat where they're installed on the bow. Okay. So what we've done is we've taken some Durascrim pattern material and we've obviously cut this to size and followed the curve of the bow of the boat here. And this is exactly where I want it positioned. Now know that if you're making a cushion that fits in a specific spot, you really should make it a 1/4 inch bigger all around the perimeter because the fabric will shrink it up a little bit. For this, since it doesn't fit in a specific spot, we just made this to size, and this is the size that we'll cut our foam to. We'll use this same starboard side pattern for the port side pattern, obviously flipping it or mirroring it.
In this chapter, we'll be cutting our foam and fabric to size.
We've laid our pattern on top of our foam, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a marker, because this side is curved and the other sides are straight, so I've just got them lined up there, and I'm just going to put little dashes following this curve. Now, dry fast foam, let's talk a little bit about it. If you use a breathable fabric, then if the cushion gets wet, which water always finds its way into cushions, then it dries out quickly. Now we're covering the entire cushion with vinyl, but we are going to put a vent at the bottom of the cushion because this cushion slopes, and that'll help it to dry out if it gets wet. There is no right side or wrong side to the foam, even though one of these has to be flopped, because one's on the right side and one's on the left side, or starboard and port because it's on a boat. So we'll put this one over here and put our bags on it and mark the lines here too. You may notice here that this pattern actually overlays our foam over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this one out, which goes into this piece, and then we're going to glue a section on. Even though it's a small sliver, gluing actually works perfectly. So we're first going to cut this one out, and then we'll show you how we glue sections if you're short. This is a Sailrite blade foam saw. It actually works phenomenal for cutting dry fast foam, polyurethane foam, all the Cushion.min foam available from Sailrite. It has a base that it rides on, so your cut is almost perfectly vertical. This is a headliner adhesive spray glue. You can also use foam lock or 3M general trim adhesive. They all work well for gluing foam. So I've cut a piece of foam, and what you want to do is you just want to coat both surfaces where you're going to be gluing it, and you want it to tack up. So we're going to allow it to tack up before we bond the surfaces together. If you only do one surface, it's not really permanent, okay? So we'll let it tack up, and then we'll touch it, and when it's tacky, we'll bond it. So I usually touch it, and if it doesn't transfer to your finger or hand, then it's ready to be bonded. And all you want to do is just push it together, and believe it or not, this bond will not be felt. And I don't need that much, so I'm going to trim it a little bit more. That's all it is. All there is to gluing. So you can glue layers together, you can glue little pieces together. If you're short, don't throw away your foam. It's expensive enough. So now we're just going to mark on this piece and we'll cut it out. I do want to show that you can use an electric kitchen knife. I'll show that really quick. So an electric kitchen knife works well. When possible, I try to use the edge of a table to keep my knife nice and straight. Now this is a curve, so that'll be a little bit more difficult, but watch how nicely this cuts. As long as you hold it straight, it actually does a pretty good job. Take a look. So don't feel like you have to buy a really expensive foam saw, even though I do love that foam saw. We're using Eversoft vinyl fabric, which is an indoor-outdoor seating vinyl. It's phenomenal fabric. This is going to be the bottom plate, which is just the regular vinyl. This is going to be the top plate. This is a channeling Eversoft material. So I've already cut the bottom plate via the pattern here, and it's exactly the same size as the pattern. It's slightly off a little bit, but that's no big deal. And now that the bottom plate's cut, which is this one, I'm going to use it to cut the top plate. Why am I going to do that? Well, because I need to make sure that outside surfaces are facing each other, because obviously we want this to be the right direction, because it's not just a square or a rectangle. It has shape to it. So we're going to position this on here, and we're going to cut the channeling fabric. Okay, so we have to make 2 of these. Now, because this is channeling fabric and because this has got an arch to it, if I put this up to it, I could actually, if it weren't channeling fabric, I could position this diagonally like this and it would work. But since it's channeling, I'm making the channels go straight across, so they're perpendicular to this straight edge, which means this doesn't fit. So remember that if you're doing channeling and you've got an arch like this, you may have to order more fabric, double the amount. And if you don't have channeling, you probably don't have to worry about it. So we're going to lay our weighted sandbags on top of this after we have it positioned so that it's parallel with the channeling lines and straight against here. That looks good. And this channeling fabric cuts nicely with scissors. So we're going to cut this out and we'll show you what's next. I've already cut my boxing, which is the vinyl without the channeling, and my foam is 3 inches thick, and I've used my clear acrylic ruler, and you can see I have 3.5 inches for my width. 3.5, 3 and 3/4 would work for boxing. I like my cushions nice and tight. Now what we're going to do, this is my top plate here. I'll just flip it over so you can see that. I've measured around the top plate and I need about 17 feet of boxing. I am not putting the zipper in the boxing. I'm actually going to put it on the bottom plate, and we'll show you how to do that. I am going to use a continuous boxing that goes all the way around, especially since I don't have a zipper plaque in it. The zipper is going to be on the back side. If you used a seamed boxing, that typically means that the seams will fall at the corners, so you would cut your boxing to match each of the sides of the top or bottom plate, and then you would sew it together at the corners. Now, even though this is a continuous boxing that goes all the way around, I am going to seam it, but do I care where the seams go? No, I don't. That is a way that you can save a ton on fabric, because you'll just sew long lengths of boxing together until you get the appropriate amount for your cushion.
Next up, sewing our boxing together.
So I have several long strips that I've cut, and I need to seam them together, and I don't care where the seam falls, so I'm going to use a 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas and upholstery. This is an acrylic basting tape, not a rubber base, so it doesn't yellow. I peel off the backing, and what I want to do is put outside surfaces facing each other, and we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to do a French seam, because I think it looks really good. So let's take it to the machine and sew. I like to sew my vinyl at about 6 millimeters. 5 millimeters would also work. I'm going to put a magnetic guide at the 1/2 inch mark on the needle plate right there. So we're sewing a 1/2 inch from the raw edge. I've already set my tension. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning and just sew down this end and do some reversing at the end. The easiest way to do a French seam is to actually put the 1/4 inch basting tape, obviously in your seam allowance, on both sides, and watch how we do this. Because if you do a French seam, you want a backing material, because otherwise the top stitch doesn't provide any strength at all, because it's basically just sewing into the 2 layers that are on top. And if you splay this open like this, and you actually separate it with your fingers. Now we do have basting tape on the inside here, we don't have to have that step, so I have to peel it open because of that. Let me do that real quick. And then what you can do, since you put basting tape on the seam allowance, is just press it down and you've got it held in place. So then you can take your sacrificial material and put it on the top. What I'm going to use is this carpet binding. It's cheap. But you could use almost any material that's fairly light and fairly strong. I've already got double-sided tape here, since when we basted it together, we just put it on top like that. And now when we sew through that, that adds more strength, and we'll cut the excess away when we're done. So now we want to do a top stitch. and I'm just going to use the center foot on the left side as my guide. I do a little bit of reversing, but I don't want that reversing to show up, so I keep it very close to the edge where my seam allowance is going to be, and I'll do the reversing here as well, very close to that edge. And then all I'll do is I'll move this to the other side because we kept the needle in the center position, and I don't even cut my trailing threads here. And do the same thing over here. A little bit of reversing. So as you can see, we have a beautiful French seam, and we'll do this to all the pieces that have to be joined together until we get the amount that needs to go all the way around our cushion. At the bottom of our cushion, since we're doing all vinyl and yet we're using a dry fast foam, I'm going to install a mesh called Fibertex, or you could use the brand Textiline. Now this is just a fabric sample that's available from Sailrite in a color that is complementary to the Eversoft vinyl. And this way I didn't have to buy a whole yard for the cushions. I just bought 2 samples. I don't even need to worry about that staple. I'm going to sew this onto the end because we're only going to use it at the bottom side of the cushion where we expect the water to basically drain past. So double-sided tape here, outside surfaces face each other, which means this goes on just like this, and we'll sew it here. And this time we're going to do a semi-flat filled seam. So it means we're going to sew here, and then we're going to fold this back and sew this like that. We'll show you what it looks like when we're done. So this is our semi-flat filled seam with our top stitch here, and the Fibertex or Textiline is folded back. We have plenty of material here. You can use a ruler if you want, but I'm just going to eyeball this and cut it so that it's equal with the rest of the boxing, and we can throw that away. My cameraman asked why I ordered 2 of the samples of this. That's because I need 1 for each cushion, since this is a 3.5-inch boxing, and I think the sample's smaller than that, so I had to get 2.
Coming up next, we'll be installing the zipper in our cushion bottom.
So here's where we're going to install the zipper, and the nice thing is that this cushion has a flap that secures it to the surface that it's mounted on. And you can see this flap that we're going to make actually covers the zipper fairly well here, and that way the zipper is just not up against the surface of your application. And so we're going to have to make a flap for the fasteners, and we're going to be sewing in a zipper at the bottom of the cushion like this. Now on the opposite side, we're going to have smaller tabs with fasteners in it. The idea is that this is the bottom side of the cushion, and this gets fastened down all along this edge, along this long flange. Then this comes over, and these smaller tabs get fastened down with your finger underneath like that. So we're going to make small tabs like this as well. Okay, now that we have our boxing cut and we have our plates cut, we're going to take the bottom plate, we're going to flip it upside down, and we're going to have a zipper on the straight side here, right along this edge. And we're going to just do a simple approach to this zipper, not creating anything fancy. I'm going to measure up 2 inches because I'm actually going to have a snap flange on this, and that snap flange will cover this zipper. I want to be about an inch from the edge so that I get maximum opening to insert the dry fast foam into this, because it's hard to insert it into something with channeling. And I'm going to mark a line all along this at 2 inches till I reach the other side at 1 inch. Again, I'm using the 1/4 inch basting tape. You don't want to use anything wider because then it'll possibly be too close to the zipper's teeth. And I'm putting it at the far extreme side of the zipper. I'll do it on this side and this side. Okay, I've taken some of the scrap vinyl and I'm going to cut it to the width of the zipper. And I want 2 of those. Okay, these are about 2 1/4 inch in length. It's not important that they be a specific length. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some double-sided tape just at the bottom edge here on both of them, and then just rip them apart like that. And then we're going to put our slider on by pulling the teeth apart, and we want the puller to be on the side with the double-sided tape. So we're going to just push it on the end. This is a Linzip number 5 molded tooth zipper, and there we go. We'll just leave it right here at that location. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to peel off that and fold that back here like this, and peel off a little bit of this, and we're going to create a stop on the end of the zipper, like so. We want the double-sided tape on this side. And it doesn't matter if it's even. This is the underside, and actually nobody's going to see it because it's on the inside of the cushion. But I like to put it on like this so that the vinyl surface is facing out like that. Don't worry if it's not even. That's not important. We'll be doing the same thing to the other side. Now I like to put this on right at that line. The line's right here. And I'll peel back the double-sided tape. And we'll baste it on there. Now when you get to the slider is going to make it want to basically go out of position a little bit. So I just push the slider in towards the center, and I try to baste that on so it goes down nice and smooth. See, I've got my slider in it. I got to move that puller to the middle. There we go. And we'll continue basting down to our 1-inch stop mark, and we'll put this on the other end. Okay, I want this presser foot to be up against the teeth, but I also want to move the needle to the left so that I'm not sewing through the double-sided tape, but it's closer to the zipper's teeth. And I'm going to do some reversing here at the beginning. And then we just sew right along the zippers. And all you do is sew right along the zipper's teeth. Now when you come to the slider, I'll show you what we do there, but with this presser foot up against the teeth, it is this easy. Now if you were sewing a coil zipper, you'd have to worry about what side's the right side and the wrong side, but this is a molded tooth, so we don't have to worry about that because the slider can go on either the top side or the wrong side of the zipper. Okay, we're coming to that slider. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bury my needle like that, and then I'm going to lift the foot, and this is a non-locking slider, and so I'll just push it past the presser feet. Once the slider's passed, lower the foot and continue sewing. When we get to the other end, we're going to do some reversing, but we're also going to sew it closed at the end. So here we are at the other end. I'm going to make sure it walks over this. Do a little bit of reversing here. Then with my needle down, I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to roll around here. And I'm going to sew to the other end. And I am going to do some reversing because this is going to get pulled on pretty hard when we insert the foam. And I think we're ready to sew this side now. So I'm going to turn this around. Now I could sew from this side or I could sew from the other side. I'm going to have the most of the bulk in towards the throat of the sewing machine, but I'll just contend with that. So we're going to sew down this side. Okay, we're going to reverse here, and then I'm going to basically run over the teeth. So do that carefully. Turn it around and sew it closed. There, I hit a little bit of a tooth, but it still sewed up beautifully. There we go. Okay, how I like to slit these, this is just a quick and rough zipper installation, is use a seam ripper and start at the end. Make sure you're not cutting your zipper. I can feel it. And you want to go right down the center of your stitches, trying to be as neat as possible. Now when I get past all this stuff, then I'll actually put the red ball down because that protects anything on the bottom side. And we'll just go all the way to the stop. This end on the cushion, this is a straight side where we have the zipper. This is going to have a flange on it so that we can snap it to the application it rests on, the bow of the boat. So what we want to do is, this side is 80 inches for us, and we want it to be a little bit short, so it basically ends up a few inches from the end of the cushion here.
Creating the snap flanges is next.
So I'm going to cut my snap flange 3 inches shorter than whatever edge you're going to be securing it to, and then we're going to take away 1 inch for hems on the end. So that's 77 inches for us, which I've marked here. And I made this flange, if you look at the clear acrylic ruler, exactly 6 inches here. So that makes a good flange, and it also covers our zipper. So we're going to cut it here. This is the outside surface. We want outside surfaces to face each other. We're going to create hems on the end. So I fold the outside surfaces so the wrong side is here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it at a 1/2 inch here, and we are going to sew this. Now make sure that you do reversing, Because if you don't, oops, my needle's in the left side, I'm going to move it to the center. If you don't do reversing here, then it's going to pull out. So I don't like to go too deep, but I definitely want to do reversing here and also here. I'll leave this in the machine. I'll bring over the opposite side and we fold it so outside surfaces are facing each other. And we do this exact same thing with this one, making sure that you do reversing. Now what we'll do is we'll take this out and we'll cut the corners back to reduce the bulk. I'm going to cut this, and we don't want to cut into our stitching. We're going to do it here too, and here. And then we're going to turn this right side out. So we're going to push this material out and put our thumb in here or a screwdriver and get it out on that first seam or that stitch that we just made, and we'll do that to the other side as well. Now I'm going to do a top stitch, and this is the folded side, this is the unfolded side. I don't have to worry about this because it's going to be on the cushion. I'm going to use the center foot, the right side here, and we can just do a little bit of reversing here, not going too far into it. When I get to the corner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bury my needle at about the same position that I'm sewing from the edge. I'll use a reverse lever if I need to make adjustments. And I didn't do that right. There we go. The needle comes up slightly so that you don't skip a stitch. And then we just rotate it around on the buried needle, lower the foot, and sew down this side. And then we're going to do the same thing when we reach the other end. Now make sure that it stays folded neatly. Sometimes what I do is I actually fold the material back here, and then I put my hand here until I get to that spot where I folded it, and then I just repeat the process. So fold it here, make sure it's even. Put my finger here, and then sew. For the tabs on the small tabs, we're going to make them 7.5 inches, which you can see I have a line marked at 7.5 inches, by 4 inches. So let's just put this on so you can see it here. Well, you really can't see it very well. So 4 inches is here. And 4 inches here. Now we need 6 of them, so we're going to make 6 of these. Okay, so we have all of our strips here, and this is the 7.5 inch, this is the 4 inch. We're going to fold it like this, and we are going to sew this side here and here at, you could do a 1/2 inch, but to be honest with you, doing a 1/4 inch is probably better because there's just less bulk. So I'm going to sew it at a 1/4 inch, which is basically the side of the foot here. And we want to make sure that you do the reversing again because you're going to be pulling against these. So we're going to come to the bottom here, reverse. Now here's a quick way to get this done. I need to reverse a little more. Is we take the next one and we do the same thing here. And I actually feed the flat end up here rather than the folded end. And then we just do sew right onto the next one. Reverse, make sure you reverse on it. And sew down. So that was my last one, and I'll leave them all together. I'm just going to cut this first stitch, and what I can do is just turn this around here like this and sew down this side in the same manner. Oops, see that one, I got to fold it. There we go. And reverse. And then put the next one in and continue on. So now we just cut apart the threads of each one of these things, and then what we want to do is trim the corners on all 4 corners without cutting into our seam allowance. And we're going to do that with all 6 of them. Okay, this is kind of the unfun part. What you need to do is flip these right side out, and they're fairly small, so it's going to seem difficult, but it is possible to do. So I just flip it the outsides like this, and then once you get the outsides pretty much flipped like that, then you just push it through with your fingers, and you want to work out those corners. So once you get them turned right side out, if you have any corners that are kind of stubby like that, just put a screwdriver in there, a fairly small one, and just work the corner, and that comes out pretty nice like that. Okay, so now what I do is I kind of spread it out so that it's on that first stitch, and I sew around the perimeter here, kind of like we did with a longer strip. Do a little bit of reversing here at the bottom. Bury the needle, and then make sure the needle's coming up, otherwise you'll get a skip stitch before you lift your foot and pivot on the needle. Now, you can do this in kind of a production fashion here, which I'm going to show. So needle's coming up slightly, lift the foot and push your finger out there. Make sure you lower your foot, otherwise you will have a mess. And then just continue on in the same fashion.
Coming up, we'll be installing the snaps in our flanges.
Okay, this strip here is around 76 inches, so 76, and we want to put snaps about every 20 inches, so divide it by 20. That's 3.8 or 4 spaces. So we'll put 76 in, and we'll divide that by 4, and that is 19 inches. So we'll mark a snap at every 19 inches, starting with a snap about this close to the end. There's no rule for this. You just want snaps anywhere from 15 to 20 inches. So I have the position marked, and I'm going to go up from the raw edge about 2 inches and mark with my scribe ball pencil where every fastener is positioned. If your scribe ball pencil isn't working well on vinyl, I'm not sure this is good, but if you touch it to your tongue or put it in some water, watch what it does. Look at that, pretty incredible. For this flange, we're going to install the pull the dot snap. You can see it says pull the dot on there. What the socket has is it has a, if I can flip one over here, has a lock, which means it only will unsnap on the opposite side of the lock, which is the side that doesn't have the lock in the inside of the cavity. So I'm going to use the press and snap tool, and this is a special die with a flat side to it. You can see that flat side right there. So the lock goes to that flat side, like that. Now for me, I'm going to roll this die around because this is the little pip, and this pip is the side that is easily released so that it's directly in line with the front of the press and snap tool. I'm just looking down straight at it. Now I don't get concerned about the button that has the writing on it. Some people like to position the dot on the side that is released, but most people don't. So I've got the pip here, and we want that to go up for us because we want to be able to unsnap this so that it unsnaps from the inside. So I'm going to position it over my spot and press the press and snap tool. And if you look on the inside here, you can see the little pip on the inside of the cavity that goes down is at the bottom towards the raw side of the flange. And that's how we want to install every one of these at every one of our marks. For this long flange that we're going to attach to the bottom side of our cushion, we used a pull the dot fastener here, which is a locking fastener. That way, if there's a heavy wind or anything on the bow of the boat, the cushion won't get lost because it only pulls apart one way. However, for the tabs on the other side, which have to be locked on after the cushion is flat, we're going to use a regular snap. So here you can see the difference. This is the pull the dot that has the locking thing, and this is a regular snap that has no lock in the cavity. So this is the snap we're going to use for these tabs. And these tabs, we want to position the snap a little bit further out since we have to fasten these on with the cushion down, not up in the air vertically like we can with this one. So we position them at 3 inches centered. So we marked it with our scribe ball pencil. The neat thing about this die that's for the pull the dot is it can really be used even for regular snaps. I wish they would just include that in the package, but this is not manufactured by Sailrite. If it were, we would include it. Now don't worry about which direction this goes. I'm going to put it on so that the barrel goes onto my snap like this, because I can see exactly where it's going to go. And we're going to put them on each one of these tabs. An alternative to the press and snap tool, which does cost a lot of money, is to punch a hole. I'm going to punch a hole with a Sailrite drill hole cutter, and I've got a cutting pad on the bottom side. This is an 1/8 inch hole. You might be able to find a tool to do that as well if you don't want to buy that. And then I'm going to put the button with the barrel protruding up through here and put the socket on top. This is a Sayrite Deluxe Snap Fastener Installation Tool. This is for the eyelet, this is for the button. We're going to put the button on there, and then you just give it a few blows with the hammer until the barrel is rolled over nicely and this no longer moves, which is done perfectly well there. And this also can be done with your pull the dot fasteners as well. So you don't have to spend the money on the press and snap tool, you could just buy this. We applied the 1/4-inch seam stick all along the bottom raw edge of this where the snaps up, and we're also going to do it to these small strips. This just allows us to position them exactly where we want them, so we don't have to worry about it when we take it to the sewing machine and sew. Now I know I'm putting this on, well, they're all together like this, but then I just break it apart like that, and it makes the installation of the double-sided tape fast.
In this chapter, we'll be sewing our plates to the boxing.
So this is my bottom plate and my top plate. Outside surfaces are facing each other. If you were sewing and you were not going to baste on the bottom plate after the top plate is sewn on with boxing, then you'd want to do match-up marks about every 2 foot or so. This is a tool that actually works pretty well with vinyl, so we can just punch through, and you can see we have a mark there and a mark there. And I do that about every 24 to 3 foot all the way around the perimeter, so that when I'm sewing it together, I make sure that everything lines up perfectly. Now, if you don't have that tool, then what I typically do is I just use scissors and I cut a little triangle out, and I don't want to go deeper than my seam allowance. So match-up marks are important when to get the top plate and the bottom plate to line up so it's not askew. And that's why we use them when we don't use double-sided tape. But we're going to do a little bit something, in my opinion, that's a lot easier. And that is that we're going to sew the boxing onto the top plate, and then we're going to use our 1/4-inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery, and we're going to baste it in place so we have it perfect, and we can take it to the sewing machine and sew it very, very quickly instead of using our match-up marks. Now make sure that you use a good seam stick, and Sayrite carries one of the best. It's an acrylic base rather than a rubber based. So buy it from Sayrite because it sticks well, doesn't tend to gum up your needle as much as a really rubbery base glue does, and it doesn't yellow. So we're going to take our flange and we're going to baste it to the straight edge of this cushion all along its length, and we're going to make sure that this spacing is the same when we reach the other end. If not, we're going to move it. So I've marked my spacing for these tabs on the other side, and we want one close to the corner. That's always a good idea. And we'll just baste these on as well. Everywhere from 15 to 20 inches, I've already spaced it out. And I am going to put one right down here. This is the top edge of our cushion. So we're going to do this next. So you can see we got one a couple inches away from this corner. I would never want it on the corner because it just makes it more difficult to round the corner. So it's about 2.5 inches from the corner. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to sew, this is our edge, we're going to sew 3/4 inch with a straight stitch, doing some reversing here all the way down this one and doing reversing at the other end. And then here, we're going to sew 3/4 inch, reverse here, and reverse here, and we'll show you what it looks like when we're done. The idea being is that will help to hold this down to the back side of our cushion. Our boxing is going to be sewn into 1/2 inch, and that'll just put an extra stitch here, which will keep these from actually just kind of hanging wherever. They typically want to hang out like this. By doing that, they'll hang more like that. Because we have that magnetic guide on there at 3/4 inch from the needle, this is really easy, just as long as you keep the fabric from getting caught on anything. Here's our 3/4 inch stitch reversing here, and here's the 3/4 inch stitch on these tabs on the side. We're going to set this one aside, and we're going to sew the boxing onto this one. So we want this to be at the bottom to allow for breathability and for the cushion, the dry fast foam, to dry out. So I'm going to put it at the bottom here, and we are going to start sewing. You got to think about how this is going to go in the sewing machine. It's easier for the fabric to be sewn down this way rather than this way, because this would be a lot of bulk in the throat of the sewing machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this at this corner, just about right there, and we will start sewing here and leave this unsewn so that we can join the other end when it comes time. And we're going to start sewing there, and we'll show you what to do that. outside surfaces are facing each other. We're going to start there at that corner, and I'm just going to start sewing right here. We need to make sure that we sew a ½ inch. I'm actually going to sew a little bit less than a ½ inch because I'm using a pretty firm foam and it won't compress as much as a medium or a soft will. So a little bit less than a ½ inch for our seam allowance. And we'll start sewing here, needles in center position. And I'll do a little bit of reversing. And all we have to do is basically just match up the fabric as we sew. Okay, so I'm going to sew along this edge, and then I will show you what we do when we get to a corner, because you want to stop before you get to the corner and cut a relief slit. Okay, so we're coming close to this corner here. I'm going to sew a little bit closer. Let's stop there. Let's bury our needle so we don't lose our spot. And we are sewing approximately a ½ inch seam allowance, a little bit less. And you can see here, here's the edge of our fabric. What I want to do is I want to cut straight or perpendicular in from this edge about a ½ inch away from that corner, going no deeper than our seam allowance. So see that slit? So what happens here, this is really easy. This makes a beautiful 90-degree turn. What I want to do is I want to bury my needle at that slit. So I'm going to go slow here. And if I need to adjust, I'm going to use the reverse lever here, which I probably will because it looks like it's going to sew past it a little bit. There we go. That's about perfect. So my needle's buried. I want my needle to start coming up, otherwise I'll get a skip stitch, but I still want the needle buried. Now I'll lift my foot and I'll roll my assembly and create the 90-degree turn that I want in this cushion. And all I need to do is lower my foot and sew down this side. This makes a gorgeous corner. Super easy. This side is a little bit curved, and so you just have to follow that curve. There are cushions that are even more curvier, but what I do is I just take my hand here and I line it up here and I push down with about a pound of pressure, not pulling from the sewing machine because I still want the sewing machine to do the job that I need to do. But that just keeps everything lined up. And then when I reach my hand, I stop sewing and I just reposition again. Makes for very fast box cushion sewing. So here we're coming to that last corner here, and I am going to probably stop sewing. Let's see, where do I want to stop sewing? This is going to, what we need to do is determine where this is going to end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down here because it's not sewing here, and I'm going to kind of walk this over here, and look at that. So now we know where this ends, and we need to be a ½ inch or approximately a ½ inch from this. So I need to mark my fabric, and I can, since I don't have a pencil or a pin right here, I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut a little triangle out there, and that way I know where that is. Okay, so now what I can do with this is I can walk this over, but I want to cut that notch at a ½ inch approximately, going no deeper than that to make this turn. So right there. So if I walk that and I come around here to create that, so hold your finger there, I hope you can see this, and make that turn. There we go. Now, so where is that mark? There's that mark there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it here. If I just had a pencil, I'd do it with that, but you can do it with this too. Okay, and we will cut this a ½ inch away from that here. So here's approximately ½ inch, and I want to cut this perpendicular to the edge, and I'm just guessing. I mean, you could use something if you'd like to make sure that it's perfect, but that's pretty good. So what am I going to do? I'm going to lift this out, and I'm actually going to baste those together and sew those together before I sew these ends together. So we know that double-sided tape can go here, basically. This just makes it easier, believe me. Without double-sided tape, you have to hold everything in place. So we got double-sided tape there. This is the outside surface. So these two go on top of each other here. And because we have that excess fabric, it should make it possible for us to sew this together. Like that. Okay, so that's perfect. And what I'm going to do is take this in and sew it right where that guide is at approximately a 1/2 inch. It's a little shy of 1/2 inch. I'll do some reversing there. And I'm going to put a top stitch in this, just like we did on that other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this back like that and put a top stitch here. Now I know this looks like, oh, you can't put a top stitch there. Well, I can, watch. So just position the fabric so you can get it underneath the throat here. You got to kind of push your fabric in and just twist it around. And there we are sewing our top stitch. It looks like it's impossible, but it is possible. A little bit of reversing there. A little bit of reversing here. Going no deeper than our 1/2 inch. And we're ready to sew it back together again. Okay, so I'm going to bury my needle on top of my previous stitches about 1 inch or 2 or 3 away from that. Put my magnetic guide back on. Lower my foot, don't forget to do that. And then we do want to do a little bit of reversing here. And we'll sew to this corner, which already has the notch in it because we made the notch. So we'll bury our needle across from that notch right there. Needle's coming up so we don't skip a stitch. Lift the foot and pivot the whole assembly around. Let's show this because it looks complicated, but it's not. And we'll twist that around and we'll lower our foot and we'll sew over to here. Okay, so we're getting to this corner down here and there's a little bit of a bump here. I could cut it, but it actually wants to collapse on itself. So I'm actually just going to kind of push down when I get to that. So watch, because this is a weird corner. So now with the needle in there, I'm going to just pivot around. I'm going to push that fabric that direction, and then we can come back to where we began and do a little bit of reversing. And that boxing is sewing on, and we'll show you what it looks like on the table. Okay, so here's how that little slip works. It's just a really neat way to make a 90-degree turn. And if you turn this right side out, there's what your corner looks like. Nice and sharp. Now this is the easy part. This is why I don't need match-up marks, because I'm going to use the 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery all around the perimeter of our bottom plate. This is pretty thick because of the fact that we have this flange on it for the snaps. But our ultra feed sewing machine can easily sew through this. So we'll show you what's next after we go all the way around the perimeter. This is our 90-degree. This is our 90-degree corner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the boxing so that I can tell exactly where that corner should fall, and then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to notch it there. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other corner. So this is our top plate, this is our bottom plate. The seam stick needs to be very close to that raw edge of the bottom plate to do this. Since we notched the corners, we know where it should start. So I'm going to peel up the seam stick on this 30-inch side for our cushion. And this basically should be the corner, which means I need to put a little slit in it. And we don't want to go too deep because we don't want to go into our actual stitch. And we're going to take this and put that slit a 1/2 inch from the corner approximately. Okay, and then we're going to baste, because this basting tape holds the vinyl, this Eversoft vinyl, so beautifully. And I don't want to pull, because you can actually stretch this vinyl. But if we found that we were short or something like that, we could pull it one panel more than the other. That's the beauty of the double-sided tape. We can get this perfect prior to sewing. And that's why I don't necessarily need match-up marks. So now we're coming to this other corner, which should fall there. And look at that. It's going to fall there. It's a little bit outside of there. So what I'll do, because I started pulling at the beginning, is I'll rip it up a little bit. I started pulling right here at a foot. And I'll actually just take this and I'll be gentle. Instead of pulling hard on this, I'm going to let it go down with hardly any stretch factor at all, and that'll shrink it up. You'll see that when I get to that corner again. So there, this corner is actually falling about a 1/2 inch away from there. So what I'm going to do is now that I know where this goes, I'm going to cut a slit in this perpendicular to that edge, which will allow it to take that turn. I'm going to peel up this double-sided tape and watch what we do here. So we go down here, that slit allows it to take that turn, and then we just base down this side. This is the side with the curve. So we just follow that edge all the way down to the next corner, and we hope that it lines up perfectly. So by the time we work all the way around, we can tell whether everything is matching up perfectly. There'll be no wrinkles or anything in it. If there are, then we take it up, because you can take it up again, and you can stretch or shrink one panel more than the other until it matches up perfectly without wrinkle. So this one is not necessarily a 90-degree turn. It's kind of like a weird turn, and I don't even think I need to put a slit there, but it wouldn't be bad if you did put a slit. I just don't think it's necessary. So that's basted down, and looks like this is going to need a slit right about here. Okay, this is the last corner. And hopefully we have no excess fabric. If we do, we need to rebaste again, and looks like we're going to have some excess fabric, as you can see here. So if I baste this down, which means I pulled on one more than the other, so I have a whole that much extra fabric. So we're going to resolve that by either taking it up over here and shrinking this one as we baste it, or pulling on this one, because this one was sewing, so sometimes that shrinks up stuff. So what I'm going to do is start right about here, because it's perfect there, and I will take my hand and actually hold here and pull here, and then gently put this down. See, I'm going to introduce a few little wrinkles in there, like that, and those aren't going to be visible. It's just going to shrink this up. So we're going to do this as we baste, because we had too much. There's some wrinkles in there. They will eventually come out. That's what we want. This isn't uncommon. This is the beauty of basting before you sew. Wrinkle there, a little bit less fabric there, wrinkle like there. It's not a visible wrinkle. It's just obviously very minute, because you don't want it to be proud. Okay, so we hope this ends up right. Oh yeah, look at that. It shrunk it up beautifully there. So now all I got to do is put my little relief at approximately a 1/2 inch from the corner, going no deeper than a 1/2 inch, and now we have the appropriate turn that we need. I'm going to put the Serite tag in here. I unbasted a little bit of it prior to sewing, and I just put a little bit off of the edge a little bit. I probably should baste it there, because it may move around before I sew, so I'll do that. So there's the tag, and all we have to do is just rebaste that down, and we're ready to sew. Since everything is basted in place, we can start anywhere, and we're going to sew a little bit less than a 1/2 inch from the edge, since we're using a firm foam. Do a little bit of reversing and using that magnetic guide. Keep it up against that edge. When you get to a corner, it's the same process. We already cut our slits into the corner. So we come up to this corner. We put our needle right there at the corner of that. Needle comes up slightly so we don't skip a stitch. Lift the foot, pivot on the needle. Now I've got to get this fabric all in front of me, and there's a lot of it. So sometimes I just fold it up on my lap. I take this corner and I fold it back with my finger, so I make sure I'm not sewing any wrinkles. Don't forget to lower your foot, and sew down this side. We're just going to do this all around the perimeter, and we'll be done and show you what's next. Sometimes when I'm sewing large assemblies, what I'll do is I'll fold it up on top of itself, leaving me an area to sew what I need to sew, so that I can kind of help feed the large assembly in by supporting it on my sewing surface. And then I can take my hand and do this, which makes the sewing a lot easier. And then when I get to where it's folded, I'll bury my needle and then bring this back and continue sewing. So lift this up, I get my flange. Pretty easy sewing because it's all basted together. Okay, here we are back to the beginning, and we want to run right into those stitches and then do a little bit of reversing, and we are done. Okay, next we just open up the zipper. This is a non-locking zipper, and you can just run your finger down the other side, and then you need to turn it right side out.
Up next, we'll be stuffing the foam into our cushion cover.
This is silk film. Now, you're gonna say, hey, don't use silk film with dry fast foam, and you'd be right, except for the fact that putting the foam inside of a cushion that has channeling fabric, it is very difficult because it's super, super sticky. So what I do is I use the silk film to compress the dry fast foam, and then I rip the silk film out of the cushion so that the dry fast can actually do its job. So I'm going to put this on the table and spread it out. This is center folded, and then we'll get ready for a second layer as well because this foam's too big for one single run, which is 54 inches wide. So my silk film's on the table, and I will put my foam right in the middle here, and then we're going to open up another sheet and lay it right on top. Staggering. Okay, so now we have our silk film on our foam, and this is the side with the zipper. Usually you want to insert the vacuum on the side with the zipper. So I need to open up my silk film and push it hard against the foam so it doesn't suck up the silk film. And hopefully it'll compress pretty quickly if we've got all the holes sealed or gaps. Yes. Okay, good thing, get a second helper for this, because you almost have to hold the vacuum in place, otherwise it starts to expand right away. But this makes it so easy to insert it in your cover, especially with the channeling material.
I think pushing it to the bottom would be the best.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we're going to push this to the bottom. Now the silk film has to come out, and it's starting to expand already. So we're trying to get everything into the corner before it starts to expand fully. Yeah, that's pretty good. This probably needs to go down a little bit over here. Good. And it's still expanding. Oops, this side came out actually. We'll get it in there. Now, we've done it without the silk film, and it is possible, but it is a challenge. So you want to get a second helper for sure if you don't use the silk film. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around so you can see what I'm going to do next. Now that it's inserted, we're going to basically rip this silk film. I know you're probably saying, what a waste. Well, compared to putting the dry fast foam on top of the channeling, it sticks almost like glue to it. It doesn't want to move. This silk film is well worth the waste of money that it is. If you leave the silk film in with this type of foam, then it's not really considered dry fast foam. So that's why we're going to remove it all. And we're going to tear it all to shreds. Okay, I have most of the silk film out of here, which is good. It's still not in the appropriate position, and it's expected that you have to do some more adjustment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this around, and I'm going to zip it up, because you can actually adjust some of it with the application zipped up. This is a very firm foam. That's what was desired on this boat because they step on this cushion a lot. Okay, so now it's still not adjusted appropriately. You can tell the boxing's off and the channeling's off. So what I do is I will actually work my fingers like this. Don't be shocked at this. This is normal. And it does take a while to actually get it in the right position. And just have to do this until it's perfect. And I'll probably have to come back and show you what it looks like when we're done. You can even turn it around and kind of work the fabric around this way until you get everything to land at the right position. And we'll show you what it looks like when we're done. All right, I'm very happy with it. The seams are pretty much landing on the corners after we did our adjustment. You can see that even for the bottom side, they're a little bit up, but not too bad at all. It's just a really nice tight fit. There'll be no wrinkles. And as you can see, remember as I talked about, this is actually going to be on an incline that's flat like this. And so we expect a lot of water to run underneath. That's why we made it all vinyl and put the mesh down here so that it could breathe.
Coming up, we'll be installing the cushions on our boat.
So I really should use a drill stop, but I don't have any here. So I just used a piece of tape, and I want to go the depth of my screw. A little bit deeper is probably a little bit better. So it's just a teeny bit deeper than the depth of the screw of the snap. And because we did a pattern, all I have to do is position the drill bit here. Now, I'll probably, because I've already drilled one already, I'll probably drill through a little bit deeper than I want. I really wish I had a drill stop, but I'm going to go slow, and I think I'm going to reach the end of the fiberglass here soon. There we go. So that hole is done, and we need to do that for all locations. What I'll do next is I'll move the pattern material. Now I want to drill all of them before I do that, so let me drill all of them. We don't need to show that. So I'm using a countersink bit, and that'll keep the fiberglass from spidering. So I've got some butyl tape here, and I just want to take off a chunk of it, get that paper out of the way. And then I want to take my screw. This is a sealing compound. Works a lot better than silicone. Silicone can make a mess of your deck and captures dirt. This is watertight and works phenomenally well. So I wrap it around the screw just like that. And I will use a Phillips screwdriver. This is our standard screw, not the lift the dot. And screw it in. And the butyl tape should come out from the edges as the screw gets closer to the hard surface, which is completely normal. Nice and tight. Okay, to clean that up, you take a wad of butyl tape. I'm going to try to stay out of the shadow. It's really bright out here today. And you just dab the sides, and it cleans up the excess butyl that's around our fastener very nicely.
Now that our snaps are installed, all that's left to do is snap our cushion into place, and our project is complete. Next up, a look at the tools and materials we used to complete this project. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call or email. I'm Seth Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.